Right now, we have an extreme crisis in mainstream media because they no longer get viewership. They no longer get people to actually read the articles because they are mostly BS and they really don't work that good. And so people are going to YouTube now. They're going to podcasting now. And as Lynn Allen says, nothing stops this train, and we don't really know where the train is going. Will the train just keep running and keep growing, and the 38 trillion gets to 40 trillion, to 50 trillion, to 100 trillion, to 1,000 trillion? It could be, but at some point, the train actually doesn't stop. The train just goes off rails. The first path is the socialist CBDC route, where people are making bigger governments, and the solution to the problem is making governments bigger and bigger, spending even more money, and we having a CBDC in that sense. Or the second path is where we have Bitcoin, and we have Bitcoin in a more capitalist way, where we have a smaller government, we have a smaller state, and the state is basically a service provider from the citizen, which it was initially intended to be that way. I think you should be as allowed to say everything out loud as you are also on the street, as you're also saying in your own home. We should not cross the line where we have laws and regulations in place that say this is what you can say and this is what you cannot say. This is the starting point of a dictatorship. I do think that 200,000 till the end of the year is possible, but I also think 50,000 to the end of the year is possible. Like both is kind of realistic. There's a higher chance of we hitting 200,000 than 50,000 because just there's like so much buying power now under 100,000.
Welcome to the Bitcoin broadcast. Today we have on Robin. Everyone knows Robin, the man who has interviewed over 600 people I saw, which is absolutely insane and incredible. Congratulations on doing that. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing really good. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, 600 people is crazy when you think about that. It's not even been 2 years, but I learned a lot from those almost 600 guests, or something like 600 guests, and really, really cool. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Dan, you started your podcast not even 2 years ago, or interviewing people?
Yes, I started 2023, 28th of November, 2023. And so in about a month, not even a month, then it's 2 years. And in the beginning, I only did like once a week and then twice a week. And so really doing it daily, not even a year and maybe like 10 months or maybe 9 months, something like that.
Wow, that's absolutely insane. Congratulations on doing that. I'm sure you've reached plenty of people, orange-pilled some people, and helped people along their journey. The Bitcoin community thanks you for that. But do you just want to give a little background history for people? I'm sure everyone listening to this already knows who you are, but in case someone does, do you mind just giving a little background history of yourself?
Absolutely. I think the most interesting thing always to know, for me, it's like, what is an interesting part of the history that kind of shaped my view of Bitcoin? And for me, I come from IT security, I come from software development. And so IT was always in me. I was always like a software geek kind of a thing. And so when you if you're already in the software and you already know what's kind of going on, it's easier for you to get into the idea of digital money, because a lot of people are going away and saying like, oh, I don't trust anything digital because someone else controls it. And so if you are already digital native, if you are already in the software, it's easier to grasp the digital sphere. So I had to learn a lot about Austrian economics. I had to learn a lot about gold. I had to learn a lot about why the idea of sound money, even in the first place, is existing. So a lot of people maybe that are listening are in the category where they already got the sound money aspect. They might already got like why central banks are bad, and they kind of had to learn why we can trust Bitcoin. And so for me, it was the other way around. I trusted something digital, and I looked at it and like, oh, that's super solid. And I kind of had to learn the Austrian economics. I had to learn why it's a good thing. And so that's kind of a small background story to me. I'm doing now since almost 2 years, as we discussed the podcast. I'm building out MicroSeed. I'm building out Bitcoin companies. I'm trying to figure out where can I put the most amount of value towards the Bitcoin community, and that's what I've been doing the last 2 years, basically.
That's awesome, man. I definitely want to talk about MicroSeed later because I'm interested in it, and I think what you're doing is pretty cool. But you mentioned Austrian economics a few times there. How would you describe Austrian economics versus like Keynesian? Because I think it's very important for people to distinguish the difference. Most people don't even know that there's something else besides Keynesian economics. Most people just go to college, they go to high school, and they're taught the same thing. And most people don't even know what Austrian economics are.
I think most people even don't know like there is something like Keynesian economics. They just think the economics they learn and they got taught in mainstream media and they get taught in school and university, that's just economics. And so if someone knows Keynesian economics, the word Keynesian economics, at least they're already way further ahead than most people if someone already knows that term. I don't want to be overcomplicating it, but basically, Austrian economics, in my interpretation, looks at the market and says there is a value in things, and we can assign that value, and it's all. I don't want to piss off now as Austrian economics experts and say like, oh, like how do you define it? But I always try to like make it as easy as possible and as simple as possible. For me, Austrian economics looks at things how they really are and tries to observe of what they really are. And if you look at Keynesian economics, they make a lot of assumptions in there. And so one of the main things is, for example, that when people say to you, oh, like we need inflation to power up the economy. At surface level, you could say, yeah, that makes sense. We have more money in the system, and then like more people will buy more things, and we will kind of stimulate the economy. But what ends up actually working in the favor of that is only short term, and so long term we actually are not benefiting from that, because long term we only have the currency that we have is devaluing, and we don't really have any benefits beyond that. And so when you look at something like that, or like inflation is good for our economy, it's only good short term. It's kind of a short-term fix to a long-term problem. If the economy is not doing good, we shouldn't put more money in that economy. The economy has to figure out itself how to fix itself. And so people, and this is what I'm so super surprised how people don't get that. For example, right now we have an extreme crisis in mainstream media because they no longer get viewership. They no longer get people to actually read the articles because they are mostly BS and they really don't work that good. And so people are going to YouTube now, they're going to podcasting now, they are searching their own journalists online, and they're going where it's more convenient and where it actually there's more truth and there's more transparency. And so when you have that, now the governments, for example, in Europe, but I guess the same thing is happening in America, they're trying to subsidize mainstream media to kind of save individual journalism, to save democracy, which is completely BS, because this is an institution. This is something where the free market clearly says people do no longer want it, and they kind of try to save it with pumping money in. And so this is Keynesian economics at its best. Free market, Austrian economics would just let it die because there's something else that people value now. And so this is maybe something where people get the difference a little bit better. I try to make it with real examples and not with just like weird definitions, because people fight over those definitions and what they actually mean. And so for me, Bitcoin actually makes a lot of sense because it's a free market. That's the free market money. That's the money that we really want. And so over the past years in Bitcoin, I learned that actually I want the free market to decide what's the best money. And we can now go ahead and say, oh, we should ban all the crypto and altcoin stuff. We should ban this and that. I actually don't want that. I actually want the free market that says there's Bitcoin, there's altcoins, there are normal currencies, there's gold, there's other metals, and they all should compete. And in those free markets, I think Bitcoin will come on top, and there's nothing else. Like Bitcoin will win out as the only money. And this money market, just so people have an idea, has a $400 to $500 trillion total addressable market. So if you think about as an investment standpoint, you always want to try to figure out what is the total addressable market of my investment. Now, Bitcoin is not an investment, but do that maybe later. And we want to figure out, okay, what is the opportunity that lies within Bitcoin? Where can it grow? And the minimum, at least thing for me, is addressing the money market, which is about 400 to 500 trillion US dollars to the current extent, which would be about 50% of all assets in the world. And then you come here and say like, oh, but maybe there's also a space for putting bananas or other things on the supermarket on a blockchain. I'm like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't care because that's not a $500 trillion market opportunity. That might be at the best a $500 million market opportunity. Probably not even 5 million. But this opportunity isn't as good, and that's why I don't want to even focus on it. And that's basically the principles of free market. I want to focus on the players that will win out in the free market, no matter what governments are doing. The same way as Uber won out over normal taxis is why Bitcoin will win out over the incumbent monetary system. And so this is, for me, Austrian economics versus Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics is always forced from the governments, and Austrian economics is the one where the free market actually decides on what's going on. And I hope Austrian economics experts are not mad at me now.
No, you're fine. No, that was great. I agree with you. And you mentioned the media there, and I am 100% convinced that the mainstream media, if you still want to call it that, would collapse 100% if it wasn't for pharmaceutical companies being able to advertise in the United States. I'm pretty sure that they would collapse if it wasn't for that, but that's another topic. But you did mention something there, and I kind of want to piggyback off of it because we're heading into basically uncharted territory, you could say, in the United States at least. I don't follow European markets that closely, but the United States just crossed into $38 trillion of debt. I don't think Jerome Powell knows what to do. I don't think what he does even has a massive effect on what could happen. Interest rates, lowering and hiring interest rates. I feel like he thinks that that's somehow going to save America, and I don't think so. Where do you see, I know you live in Austria and you're not in America, but I'm sure you pay attention to what goes on in America quite a bit. What do you see, and what is going on with kind of this macro economy of government overspending, more debt than ever, and how are we going to move forward?
There's two sides of the story. The first side of the story is from an individual standpoint. You as an individual, you can look at the situation and kind of decide what you do. And then there's the second standpoint, the second perspective is what is going on a broader scale, what is going on with the United States of America, what's going on with the world order. And so maybe we start with the macroeconomic side of things. So what is going on with America? What's going on with all the rest of the world? I think America is still in a very strong position. We see it now from a military standpoint. We see it because who has basically the world power? It's the one that has the biggest military in the world. And you can say a lot of bad things about America, but they really know their military stuff. they do have a great military complex. Then there's like China, there might be Russia, but you already see now that Russia isn't as strong as some might have thought it is. And so this is the major thing where they are founding this great military thing, and now we have huge debts, and those debts are basically devaluing the currency. And the devaluing of the currency doesn't only devalue the currency of the people that hold the currency, but it also devalues the power that the currency has, because now we have an exit valve. And so I explain it almost like if there's like a pool that has boiling hot water, and the boiling hot water is the one that is basically fiat, because we put in so much more fiat water, and it gets heated up, and all the frogs that are in there in the boiling water want to jump out. And so Bitcoin is not the frog in there, is anything in there. The Bitcoin just puts an exit valve. It's just like the one small hole in the whole pool where people can actually go out and say like, hey, I'm out of this pool, like the water is too hot, I don't want to be in there anymore. And so in a system where there is an exit valve, a global exit valve that is there for everyone, in that system, it actually is not good to print more currency, because all of a sudden the currency can go somewhere. If we print more money, if the government comes here and gives me helicopter money, I'll just put it in Bitcoin directly. And many of you would also. And even if they don't put it in Bitcoin directly, they put it in real estate, they put it in gold, they put it in other things. And so now we have a lot of alternatives to the monetary system, where people can spend money, where people can receive money, where people build everything that is in the traditional sense in the fiat currency there is also in the Bitcoin sphere there. So this is the major thing that's going on a macroeconomics sense, where we have exits for those huge liquidities that come in the market. And as Lynn Allen says, nothing stops this train, and we don't really know where the train is going. Will the train just keep running and keep growing, and the 38 trillion gets to 40 trillion, to 50 trillion, to 100 trillion, to 1,000 trillion? It could be, but at some point, the train actually doesn't stop. The train just goes off rails. And so this is the point of every fiat currency. At some point, they no longer live. They just die out. That's what always happens with fiat currencies. And the US dollar, the euro, the yen are no exception to that rule. And so this is the major thing that's going on from the currency standpoint, and we have this exit valve. But then is also the interesting question, what happens with governments? There is a real possibility that they are going ahead and just making a new currency, and people will get fooled again and say like, oh, let's save in that new currency. This is what happens every single time. We see it even in Turkey, in Argentina, in every single of the countries that have a really bad currency. They are just generating a new fiat currency where people can buy into again. And if they don't do that, they are actually going ahead and saying like, hey, let's just use the US dollar. They're going to a better fiat currency, which is totally legit from their perspective, because then they still have control. They still have all the aspects of the control they have, even though they don't control the monetary debasement, but at least they can control the banks, at least they can control transactions and all of the fiat BS that's going on. And so we have the exit valve, we have governments in there that keep going, and we have the train that just does not stop. Where does this all lead? It really doesn't matter that much if you pay attention to the second perspective, the individual perspective. If you save yourself in Bitcoin and you make yourself build yourself out as strong as possible, all the things that go on with like quantitative easing, we hit a 38 trillion, and in probably 2 months we hit 39 trillion. In another 2 months we hit 40 trillion. Like it just keeps on rising. You don't have to care if you have Bitcoin, and then you can do a few things. So for me, Bitcoin brings you 3 things, 3 main pillars. The first pillar is the wealth aspect. The more they print, the more adoption comes to Bitcoin, the number will just go up, and you will get wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. But that's the most uninteresting perspective of Bitcoin. The more interesting perspective of Bitcoin is that you can hold Bitcoin yourself, you can transact Bitcoin yourself, and you can choose what you do with your Bitcoin. Because all of a sudden you are in a new financial paradigm, in a new financial system where other people cannot do anything to get to your Bitcoin. They cannot do the quantitative easing. There's only the 21 million Bitcoin. They cannot just confiscate your Bitcoin because you have your own key. They can control yourself, but they cannot control your Bitcoin. And so if you are prepared for the worst thing, and I'm a big believer that things will turn out really good, and the world goes in a really positive direction, actually, because we have Bitcoin. But if it doesn't, and you prepare yourself for the worst collapse ever in history with Bitcoin in self-custody and make yourself as strong as possible, you at least are prepared for what's to come. And that's why I think buying treasury stocks, buying Bitcoin only on exchange doesn't really do a lot for you. It does only the number go up technology. It does only the system. You are part still of the train that might still like go off rails, that might still like vanish at one time, because you only have a digital number that might go up or down. With Bitcoin in self-custody, with Bitcoin actually having in your control, this is where it really changes for you. And so if you are prepared to do Bitcoin in self-custody, to have Bitcoin in your control, I still encourage you to pay attention what's going on with local politics. What are they going basically down? There's 2 main paths from here. The first path is the socialist CBDC route, where people are making bigger governments, and the solution to the problem is making governments bigger and bigger, spending even more money, and we having a CBDC in that sense. Or the second path is where we have Bitcoin, and we have Bitcoin in a more capitalist way, where we have a smaller government, we have a smaller state, and the state is basically a service provider from the citizen, which it was initially intended to be that way. And it should be that way, that the government and the state is a service provider to their citizen. And then you could even make the argument, okay, what are the services, what are the things that the government should provide? And then there are people that argue, okay, maybe nothing, maybe a little bit, maybe this and that. We can fight on those points a lot. But the basic outlook is like, do you want to go down the rabbit hole of CBDCs or the pathway of Bitcoin and freedom and sovereignty? And I clearly am on the Bitcoin way. I'm clearly at the freedom path. But you can also go down, like you can own stocks, you can own ETFs, you can own a CBDC, digital euro, and you can go down the central banking way. I just don't think you will survive in that way. And so if you are on that trajectory and paying and being in the CBDC route, you have to pay attention to what's going on with politics. You have to pay attention what's going on with the central banks and the easing and all the meetings that Jerome Powell is ordering. If you're going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you're like, oh, no matter what the central banks are doing, they will print more money. And so Bitcoin will become more valuable over time, and the adoption will grow in Bitcoin. And I have it in self-custody, and nobody can do anything against me. And so in that sense, this is a way better outlook for you individually. So coming back to your original question, like where are we going? It's kind of pointless to talk about it unless you are not in the Bitcoin. If you are in this pathway of CBDCs and central banks, or you should really, like, you should be in politics, you should defend all your rights because you really have to. But if you're on the Bitcoin way, you are in a great way protected. And then there's one small thing that I want to bring in there. There are different countries in the world that will go in different directions. Some countries will go in a very socialist direction, and some countries will go in the Bitcoin direction, and the CBDC versus Bitcoin direction, basically. If you're in a country where you see they are getting more and more socialist, they are going more and more towards central banking, they are more and more in that direction, and you cannot stop it, you might consider changing to a country where you actually go in a good direction, where they are going in a less central bank, more Bitcoin way, less central bank and more freedom and more sovereignty aspect of the way. So this is the only aspect where, yes, nobody can come to your Bitcoin if you don't want to, but they can come to you, and you should still care about politics. Like Bitcoin doesn't care about politics, but you should care a little bit because you want to be in the winning countries and not in the losing countries when it comes to the next 50 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's important to pay attention to politics to a certain extent. It's important to know what's going on. Being in America, we're very privileged, as in most people in America, they have no idea why things are getting more expensive. You know, the media tells them it's corporate greed. Most people that are in Bitcoin, we all know why. But, you know, so they don't see the problem. They don't see the solution either. So they listen to Jerome Powell. They listen to the news. And so that's all they get. That's all the information they get. But you did mention something kind of important there, which is some countries will go one direction, socialism, UBI, CBDCs, and other countries, you know, will be more free market. They'll be open to innovation. They'll be open to Bitcoin. They'll be open to, you know, the possibilities of, hey, you can still be your own bank. You can still be a free person. And I think that's important for people to understand, because with Bitcoin, you can vote with your feet and you can still vote with your money, because you don't have to bring your gold bars, you don't have to bring your wads of cash and, you know, pay your exit tax and all that. You can literally just store it in Bitcoin, and there's kind of nothing they can do about it as long as you keep it in self-custody. But you did mention something there too, and it's kind of pertains to the UK a little bit, because the UK recently has been kind of actually promoting and saying that they support what China's been doing with their CBDCs and their surveillance and their digital IDs. I know, because I'm on X and I pay attention to what's on X, people kind of blow it out of proportion. But how is it for you living over there? Do you see that happening? Do you see it coming into your real life? Or is that more of like a people are blowing it out of proportion on X type thing in Europe?
It is. So just like most people probably get that anyways, but like just for the few people that might not aren't aware of how Europe is structured. Europe, even though we hear a lot about the EU and how overboard they are in regulations, Europe really has 27 individual countries, and it's like not the same in every country. So there are countries where there is Bitcoin completely tax-free. There's countries where Bitcoin is taxed with like 30%. There's countries where like the rules are really loose. Even if the EU comes down with heavy rules, the country can like loosen them up and like not implement them. And also, if they don't police it, then it's also a different reality. And also the UK, as we famously know, they are no longer in the EU, so they have their own thing. And I had hope that maybe they're going in the right direction, but they apparently are even more going towards China without the EU, which is kind of fascinating that they are saying like we're outside of the EU now and we're going even more and faster towards China than the EU is going towards China. So this is just like some interesting points to mention before that. When it comes directly to the EU, directly to the UK, they have been doing those like putting people in jail because of tweets. There have been last year 12,800 of those cases. So there are definitely cases in there where maybe it's legit, and there might be saying like, okay, there's some edge cases and they like harassed someone or like whatever like that. Like I don't want to dismiss like 12,800 cases as like they're just doing out of political out of political intentions, but I'm of the strong belief if you have something to say, you should say it, even though it might be crazy, even though it might be wrong, even though it might be really bad to say those things. But in the internet, I think you should be as allowed to say everything out loud as you are also on the street, as you're also saying in your own home. We should not cross the line where we have laws and regulations in place that say, this is what you can say and this is what you cannot say. This is the starting point of a dictatorship, like every single time. If you look, there's like in history, if you study history, there are some certain criteria or triggering points or like small metrics that you can observe once you get started with a dictatorship. Like gun ownership and all of that. Like there's like a few of those things where you're like, okay, if this does decrease and if the freedom of speech decreases, we're coming in that situation. Like the UK is definitely no dictatorship at that point. Like we are far away from that. But with the digital idea, with the direction they're going, if we bring it back to like first principles, what we just said before, are they going towards more socialist and CBDC era, or are they going more towards Bitcoin free market era? And for me, it's very clear to see that they're going the CBDC route, they're going the socialist route, they're going the China route. And this is, and I've heard that, I think in Bulgaria when I was at the conference, we only have in the Western world, in the USA, in Europe, we only have one play that we can win. We will never out communist, socialist China. They are really good at what they're doing. They will, if every country goes communist and socialist, China will win because they have the most experience and they know how to play this game. So in the European Union, in Europe in general, in the USA, in all the other countries, the only game we can win is the freedom game, is the sovereignty game, is the individual game, is the innovative game. This is the only game we can win. And so the UK saying, hey, we want to play the game of China is saying, hey, we're giving up. We are losing. We have no clue how to handle freedom. We have no clue how to handle sovereignty. So we'll basically stick to what China is saying, and they will act more like China. So, and I haven't lost hope for the UK. There are a lot of great people in the UK that are fighting for the UK. So I haven't lost hope. But just from a first principle standpoint, I always bring it back to, in what direction are they going? And for example, to bring up a positive example, the Argentina, I think, are currently going towards the Bitcoin, going the Bitcoin way. They're not doing like Bitcoin reserves or anything like that, but they are saving a lot. They are bringing the quote how much is in the state and how much is in the government down. They're trying to cut costs of the government. They're trying to make a smaller government. They brought inflation from like 200 to 30% down, which is drastically really, really good over the last 2 years. And it's so funny because I listened to those stories in the Austrian mainstream media, and they all portrayed those things as bad things. They're like, oh yeah, they're cutting costs at the socialist thing and they're cutting this cost. And I'm like, yes, that's good. You're making advertisement for Argentina right now. That's what you have to do. In a free country, you should have the smallest possible government ever to make all the government, all the jobs, all the things that you want to have in the free market. Like it's so funny because we think, oh yeah, like governments are better in like healthcare. Governments are better in like taking care of our streets. I don't think so. If you think about how would a smartphone look like if a government would produce it, it's ridiculous to talk about it because they wouldn't even get to the point to innovate so much that they would even get to have a smartphone. That's why we have Apple doing it. That's why we have Samsung doing it. That's why we have private companies doing it. And then it's like, okay, you don't trust the governments with making a smartphone. Why do you trust them with healthcare? Don't you think that if healthcare would be private and would be in a free market, that it would be 1,000 times better? The same way as communication is 1,000 times better now with the phone and with the smartphone, and so it's just ridiculous to me that we think there are. Clearly everyone agrees governments are really bad with IT. Governments are really bad in like that's basically why I have a lot of hope for the CBDC area, because I just don't think they will have a great solution. They have like their solution will suck so much that people will be like, oh, I just use Bitcoin. That's why I think we have to heavily invest in like the Bitcoin ecosystem, in Fedimints, in like all the Lightning solutions and all the layer 2s, because this is where we win. We win the free market game and not the socialist communist game. Bitcoin will not win because some politicians say so. Bitcoin will win because it's the best free market solution out there. Yeah, and with that, I think I can end my rant. But maybe one more thing. I have a lot of hope for Europe still. Europe is an amazing place to live. Like the food is awesome here. As every European says, like I don't want to eat the bread in America because like if you are used to European bread, it's like the bread in America is really not real. And then there's like a lot of like those comparisons. And I like the small cities. I like that I can go everywhere. I don't need the car. So like I like the European lifestyle a lot, and I think it's a very healthy lifestyle. And I increasingly have more and more hope for the political level, because I see that those political players that are very critical against the EU and very critical against all the mass surveillance are actually getting stronger. And maybe I'm biased because the biggest party in Austria is very critical about the EU, is very critical about mass surveillance. They are unfortunately not in the government, which is a weird thing. They're the biggest political party in Austria, but they're not in the government because the other parties kind of colluded together against them. But they have no way of getting around them. And so there is seemingly a bigger and bigger proportion of the population that sees the problem and sees also the solutions. And so I'm very hopeful when it comes to also Europe. But right now, it just doesn't look that good. And if there's a point where it looks even worse, I might also have to move. I really just don't want to move.
Yeah. No, I love Europe. I've been to many countries in Europe. It's amazing. I just don't like what the governments seem to be saying recently. So thought I would ask, and that was a great answer. I loved the bit that, yeah, governments creating their own smartphone would absolutely fail. It would 100% fail. And it's kind of funny that you brought that up because in the United States right now, our government is shut down. And all these food benefits are all the talk. It's on the news all the time because all these people, 42 million people, are on food stamps and apparently aren't going to get their food stamp money. And so I posted about it today, but we don't have to go into that. But I just thought it was kind of funny because the government seems to have this control and this power to tell people, if you give us more money, we'll make things better. And, we've given how many hundreds of billions of dollars to cancer research. Has cancer ever been fixed? I'm pretty sure it's only gotten worse. Ever since the government took over education, according to statistics, has only gotten worse over the past multiple decades once the government took over. The roads have gotten shittier. The banks have gotten worse. Inflation has gotten worse. Healthcare has gotten worse. Everything that the government touches turns to shit. And I don't think they can control a CBDC either. That would be amazing if they tried and just epically failed, because that would be, besides 2020 happening, that would be the next biggest advertisement for Bitcoin. But going into governments, or let's say even corporations, because BlackRock is essentially, they run everything. They own everything. It's insane. And now they've created the biggest ETF in America, and it's for Bitcoin. How do you see owning ETFs versus Bitcoin individually? I'll tell you really quick, because I think owning the Bitcoin ETF is a good starting point for a lot of people that don't understand Bitcoin. And so it's a good on-ramp. But owning the ETF is not helping the Bitcoin ecosystem, and you're not truly owning Bitcoin. But what are your thoughts on that?
So there's two things. The first kind of perspective towards that is, if you have no way of owning real Bitcoin, so there's three possibilities. The first possibility is you have no way of getting the money out of some pension fund or some pension account or whatever, and the only way to get exposure to Bitcoin is a Bitcoin ETF. Then go ahead, do it, because it's better to have some Bitcoin ETF than have, a S&P 500 or anything like that. So this is the first kind of door that you can go through. And the second door is, if you think that you don't trust yourself. You don't trust yourself at all with key management. Maybe you have some sort of brain disease. You have some sort of weird illness, something that you say you don't want to fully trust in, you holding your own keys. Then you should find a solution where someone else holds the key for us. Maybe a Bitcoin ETF is a nice solution, maybe Bitcoin exchanges, maybe some collaborative custody, whatever the thing is. But in that case, if your brain is not to be trusted, maybe it's a good way to have a Bitcoin ETF. And I'm not talking about stupid people. I'm talking about really, if you have some serious brain injuries, and this is probably 0.1% or so of people in the world, and probably 0 people that are listening currently to that. Outside of those two things, you should have Bitcoin in self-custody, and there's no excuse to that. If you don't have a brain injury and you don't have forced to hold Bitcoin in an ETF through a pension account or anything like that, there is no argument for not having self-custody. There just isn't. There's not a good, I like to have it in an ETF because I don't like to have control. Why? And so it's yes, you can lose them, but also you can lose them in an ETF. And then it's what if something happens? And I'm not even talking about them stealing your Bitcoin or something like that. I'm talking about how well is it really protected in a Bitcoin ETF? How well is your online IT security? Do you have a two-factor authentication? Do you have just an online password? Because people that don't take self-custody are usually also the ones that have a really bad security in their account. And a hacker can get into an online account, in a BlackRock account, in something like that, so much easier than in a nice self-custody setup. And it's like, if you get hacked in a Bitcoin ETF or like an exchange, it's 100% your fault. Don't blame it on BlackRock. If your brokerage account gets hacked, don't blame it on a broker, blame it on you, because you could have put it in self-custody and put it in a way where it's almost impossible for anyone to hack you. And so I always say that, because people say like, oh, but you could lose it and all of that. And I'm like, yeah, with great power comes great responsibility. And if you get Bitcoin, you get why this should be the way. You get why you should have the responsibility and the power. Because if you don't get that, you haven't understood Bitcoin yet. Because you still want to give big institutions your money. You still want to give institutions all of your business. And then there's another aspect towards that. If you really care about Bitcoin, you want to do everything in your power to avoid Bitcoin being bank coin. What do I mean by that? If Bitcoin is only held by centralized institutions and nobody runs a node, nobody holds their own keys, we are running into the risk of the thing that happened with gold is happening to Bitcoin too, where nobody controls the network, nobody does the verification with their own full node, nobody does anything of that. And so Bitcoin at that point is just a bank coin, an investment. It's like Nvidia, or it's just like an asset. And I think in that world, Bitcoin goes to zero. If Bitcoin is not decentralized and secure, Bitcoin will go to zero. And so I always come to that conclusion of like, if you don't have a brain, a big brain issue, and it sounds funny, but like I 100% there are people like that, then you probably shouldn't hold your own keys. And if you cannot get the money out of your pension account, then yeah, you also don't have a choice. Outside of that, like, hold your own keys. Don't be lazy. you are being lazy. I just had Rick on my podcast, and I had him as one of my first guests. He was my 18th episode, and he lost 25 Bitcoin.
I heard that,
Basically because he saved his seed phrase not on metal, like I always say, like put it on metal. He saved it online. And so... And we talked about that. It's like, yeah, with great power comes great responsibility. And he did not play the victim. He did not go full retard and says like, oh, like Bitcoin is flawed. He saw, oh yeah, we effed up. Like we made a mistake. And so what do we do from that? We have to rebuild. We have to think about self-custody solution. And so with the great power comes great responsibility. And if you lose your Bitcoin, no matter in self-custody or an exchange or anything like that, it's your fault. And you have to realize that. That's the world we're going into, where the individual gets more freedom, but the individual also gets more responsibilities. And then with that, the individual has more opportunities to F up. And that's a good thing. We want people to learn. We want people to make bad decisions so they have good learnings from them. And so when we come back, and this is kind of the general theme of this episode, to those two pathways forward that we have. You can choose the CBDC route, the exchange route, the IBIT route, the ETF route, where you have always an overlord. You always have someone that says, oh, don't worry about self-custody. You just have that account. And if you lose the password, you can call us. You have your passport, just show your ID, you have your Bitcoin back. That's fine. We take care of the self-custody. Don't worry. It's convenient. We take care of it. You don't have to do it. You can relax, watch Netflix. Like, don't do anything. Just trust us. That's the CBDC route. That's the ETF route. The other route is, yeah, you can make mistakes. But you also get the freedom aspect. You are in control of your own life. You are in control of your own decisions. And if you want to go down that road, remember, with great power comes great responsibilities. And this is, I don't even want to make it sound amazing, because there's a lot of pitfalls in there. But at least we have people that think for themselves, and we are not living within slaves. And I think that's worth something. I think that's worth fighting for. And so I always encourage people to take self-custody. I always encourage people to actually go ahead and invest in their own freedom, in their own sovereignty, because it's always worth doing. And you're always getting screwed up if you're not doing that in the long run. Maybe in the short term it's more convenient, but it's just a matter of time till it bites you in the ass.
Yeah, I just had a Bitcoin cookie on, and we were talking about, he just lost about half a Bitcoin, about $60,000 worth. And he did the exact same thing that Rick did. We talked about that, how he left his seed phrase on a computer and a hacker got it and stole all his Bitcoin. And he's working on getting it back. But I have hope for him. But no, 100%, I agree with you. All right, I wanted to shift into something really quick. So maybe something a little more fun, just because the markets are absolutely insane right now. We've basically gone flat. If you just, if you take Checkmate's word, chop solidation, we've basically started the year around 110K, and now we're basically still at 110K. So if you'd just gone to sleep and woken up, you would still be at the same point. What are your thoughts on the markets right now? Do you see us maybe potentially going higher, lower? Do you not care? Or you're just chilling? What are your opinions about the market right now?
Yes to all of your questions. I think we could go higher, we could go lower, we could grab walk longer, and yes, I also don't care. No. But the price has an important point. I see it every single day. The price is the best marketing tool we have, and so it going up is an important thing. But it's not that the price goes up because the price goes up. The price goes up because Bitcoin is an amazing tool, and so the price going up is just a symptom of that. It's not the price going up is not the value of Bitcoin. The price goes up because of the value of Bitcoin. That's a huge difference. And so the price just shows us how many more people got the value of Bitcoin, how many more people understood the value of Bitcoin. And then there's always this talk of like, what is the cycle currently looking like, going we up and down? I do think that 200,000 till the end of the year is possible, but I also think 50,000 to the end of the year is possible. Like both is kind of realistic. There's a higher chance of we hitting 200,000 than 50,000 because just there's like so much buying power now under 100,000, and so. And I want to give one very important message out there, because people always say like, oh, like you only want the price to go down if you're not already all into Bitcoin. I'm all into Bitcoin. Same. I want the price to go down. Like I think, if you think about it, there is 21 million Bitcoin, probably less than that. Like 100% less than that. And so, but if we stick with 21 million, this is, and if you believe Bitcoin is the future money, if you believe that the fork in the road, the foundational invention that Bitcoin really is what we think it is, if those assumptions are true, and Bitcoin is freedom in that way, you want to get as much of a share of that Bitcoin as possible. And so every price tip gives you the opportunity to earn more money in Bitcoin. If you think about it, every time you get, let's say you get $5,000 every single month, and maybe you can save like $1,000 or $2,000 from that. Let's say you get every single month $1,000 that you can put into Bitcoin. If you get $1,000 into Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is at $100,000, you get a little bit. It's X amount, whatever the amount is. It's then like 0.01 Bitcoin, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I add one more zero. But then, what if Bitcoin goes up by to 150,000, and you still have the same $1,000 every month because you don't magically get a 50% increase? You still get $1,000 into Bitcoin, so you get less of Bitcoin now. That freaking sucks, and so you get less Bitcoin. And so you get less of the freedom share. On the other side, if Bitcoin goes down to 50,000, all of a sudden you get twice as many Bitcoin as before. Like, that's freaking great. And so if you're not 85 years old, you probably want Bitcoin to go up. And so there. It's always interesting for me when I see young people, I say like under 40 years old. If I see like young people under 40 years old that say, "Oh, I wish Bitcoin could go higher," like, why? What do you want? Like, you get Bitcoin and you understand what Bitcoin is. The best thing that can happen to you is a long-winded bear market where you can hustle in the fiat world and get as many Bitcoin as possible. You always hear people say two things. They want to go back down to like earlier times and say like, "Oh, I wish I could have bought at $100. Guess what? You haven't. And then they also want higher prices. So they're just being greedy. They're just being greedy. And so, but if you're actually greedy, if you actually want the best for yourself, you want Bitcoin to go down. That's actually being greedy. Like, I'm being greedy in saying like, hey, I want Bitcoin to go down because I'm 27 years old now, and my salary will be next to next year probably a lot bigger and better than now, or now it's better than like a year ago. So I'm getting into my prime years where I earn a lot more fiat, so I can buy more Bitcoin. So I don't want to. The biggest fear that I have is that Bitcoin price just runs away and I don't have a chance to accumulate more Bitcoin. If Bitcoin goes, and I get that question asked more than you might think, what would you do if Bitcoin goes tomorrow to $1 million? I would fucking cry. Like, because I haven't bought more Bitcoin. I want Bitcoin to be at $1 million at like 2030, 2035, like somewhere there. Not like tomorrow, because like, I don't know about you, but I'm not done stacking and I want to buy more Bitcoin. So to all price talks, I always say like, you want Bitcoin to go down and you want to take advantage of low prices as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this past year, I posted that too, was this has been a DCA dream, because if you have a daily or weekly purchase that you have set into Bitcoin, every time that you get paid, you're buying whatever, $100, $1,000, $2,000. It doesn't even matter. If you're buying on a consistent basis, and we've stayed flat essentially for an entire year, like, what a gift. It's been absolutely amazing, like how much you can accumulate when Bitcoin isn't just absolutely ripping up. And you know, if we go down in 2026, I agree with you. You know, bonuses hit, you get more fiat dollars, and you're stacking more. You're getting more Bitcoin. But before we end, I want to talk about MicroSeed. I actually don't know too much about your company and how that works. So, do you mind explaining a little bit about MicroSeed and what you do?
Yeah, I don't want to bore people with like an ad or anything like that. But basically, like I got. So there's like multiple different angles here. The first is like, what are we doing? And I want to explain it as simple as possible. In the past, you got always such huge plates where you can put your seed phrase in there. And there are some disadvantages to that. First of all, you always have to buy a new plate if you have a new seed phrase. So if you, for example, make if you leave your seed phrase around and someone makes a picture of it, all of a sudden, like, you have to make a new one because it's compromised. So your seed phrase should never go online. It should never go in an iCloud. It should never go in a phone. Nothing like that. So there's this one mistake of, like, you have the metal seed phrase and you always have to buy a new one. So I was like, why don't we have a device where you can make it and you just buy a piece of metal? And then the second aspect is, like, why does this huge thing be, like, why is this so huge? Like, why those blades, like you can kill someone because with those huge blades. So we were thinking, and I will do that quickly. We have developed this small device. And so basically, I literally just have to screw the washer out here. So that's basically a washer that I'm always playing with. I put some words on there. I think there's some friend's name on there or something like that. And you can put 24 words on that one washer. You have seen it before where you can put on one washer one word, and like Seyr and other ones do it. But then it gets big, like you have to put it in a tube and all of that. So we wanted to make a thing where you can put all your 24 words or 12 words into one single washer. And so how it works is you have the base and you put into the base the washer. And by the way, this is a normal washer. This is just like, you can get that in the supermarket, and not in the supermarket, but in some stores where you can buy like building utensils for like 10 cents or 50 cents. You can even buy it from Amazon in like packages. You can buy them for stainless steel, titanium, anything like that. The exact measurements, what you need, is also on our website, so you can be sure that they're actually fitting. Of course, you can buy them also from our website, but the main reason is why we build it that way, that you can literally just go in some store, buy a pack of like 10 washers, and like for $1 you can come back and like have the washers, and where you can put your seed phrase, and then you can use that. I recommend titanium. As I said, you can put in, you can buy the titanium washers from our website. You can buy it from Amazon, but you can also just put it on stainless steel. You put it in there. You put that screw, like this little screw, on there, and then you literally just like you put it in there till it like goes with it. And then the nice thing, as you see here, there's like 60 of those settings there. And so what you can do is you can stamp one word onto the washer for every setting. And so you have 60 settings, and you have here a table. That table goes on there, and you have two lines. So you have the inner line and the outer line of the washer. So you can put on one side 60 characters in one ring, and then 60 characters in another ring. So in total you have 240 characters onto one single washer. And how it works is basically you put the washer on there, you put the table on there, you put the punch. So there are like different punches. This punch, for example, is a W, but like you get the punch for like everything, also for numbers and everything. You just put them in there, and you punch it on there. Like you should hold it nicely, not like with that. Like hold it nicely and put it on there. Do it in the table and not in the air. And then you see. I don't know if the camera can see that, but there is now a W on there. The camera probably didn't pick that up. But that's it. That's the whole product and what we did. And the reason why we did it. And now the second aspect of that is like, why do I do that? And I was a lot thinking about that, about that decision tree of, do I want to be involved in a company? Because I'm an equity partner there. I'm actually like a co-founder of that company. So I'm like very involved in that company. Because up until this point, I was just a Bitcoiner having a podcast. And then I was kind of hesitating to doing that because it's a lot more responsibility. It's a lot more time involvement. The podcast is already running. Like, why should I get more stress? But then I was like, I think the solution is freaking awesome, and I want to put more energy towards that. And anything that promotes self-custody is a good thing for me. And so I decided to join the company. I decided to be a co-founder of that company. And together with Daniel and Fritz, we're trying our best we can to promote sovereignty, run your own node, do self-custody. And this is basically what I've done. And I probably do like a full video once on that story of like how I joined MicroSeed and like why I joined it. Also from a strategic perspective, because I'm trying to be as transparent as possible with my decisions on like why do I do a podcast for personal branding, why do I join a company for the strategic outlook of having equity and all of that. Might be an interesting episode that I might do one day, but I wanna be further into the story when I share that, and I think it will be a lot of fun. And so these are basically two aspects of it. Like I think it's an amazing product. Daniel built the original MicroSeed, and I joined later on, like building out the website, building out the marketing of it, and joining as a co-founder. And then the second aspect of like the why do I do that from a strategic point of view, I just think it's very, very important to actually build something and not just be a commentator. So I basically was switching from being just someone that speaks about Bitcoin to also someone that speaks about Bitcoin and builds in Bitcoin. And this is my first project. And I can already tell you guys, there's a lot more coming. I'm planning more companies. I'm planning more interesting project in the space. And it's funny because people tell me like, oh, you're doing already so long, this like podcast and all of that. Like, are you getting sick of it? And I'm like, I'm just getting started. Like the first 2 years I had to get warm and to see kind of the industry. I haven't really got started with all the things that I have planned for the future. And yeah, like Fedimint and Lightning and the scaling solutions, like I'm very bullish on the future of Bitcoin, and I have a lot of interesting things planned, and I will be a builder in the space for a very long time.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you doing this. What a way to end it, right? You know, you're showing it's proof of work right there. That's what Bitcoiners do. Go out. Once you figure out Bitcoin, you go down the rabbit hole, and you can't stop thinking about it. Then you start building in it, and you've done an amazing job. And I really do appreciate you coming on. Do you just want to say where people can find you? I'm sure they all already have, but your YouTube, your X account, stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my name is probably somewhere in the description or maybe even on screen. But basically, my name is Robin, Seyr, S-E-Y-R. And so you will find me by just like putting in my name on YouTube, on Twitter. This is my main platforms. My podcast is also on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, on Fountain, on every single podcast platform. I'm also on Rumble. Rumble gets bigger and bigger. YouTube is kind of my home domain. So like there's like the live stream also. There's also the podcast. But the live stream and the podcast are also on Twitter and also on Rumble. And the podcast is also on Spotify. So like wherever you are, I probably am there. But the most important thing is that you are doing self-custody. And I always say that like educate yourself in the Bitcoin space. If my story doesn't resonate with you, like find someone else that resonates with you and like find other Bitcoin educators. If you don't put your Bitcoin seed phrase on a MicroSeed, make sure to put it on something metal, something durable. Don't put it on paper, like don't put it on exchange. Like there are many other products. I'd rather have you using some other thing. I mean, literally, this is for people that want to have a MicroSeed but don't want to spend the money a MicroSeed. Go ahead and buy those punches you find on Amazon and buy a metal plate on Amazon. It costs you probably like, I don't know, $10 or whatever, or $15. And you can make with a hammer on a metal thing your own seed phrase. You don't have to buy. Those products are here to make your life easier and to make it faster and like a little bit nicer and all of that. But you can literally just go on Amazon or maybe even like in your local store and just buy the necessary things to do that. And you're like way cheaper, but you also have to spend a lot more time to like actually do it in the nice way and all of that. So for people that say like, oh, like the MicroSeed costs like $249. I think $249 is the current price in the US. And $299, I think, is in international, depending on where you are. It's a whole nother rabbit hole that I've gone through, like figuring out international pricing, because with like taxes and all of that, it's not even that easy. So I'm sorry if it's sometimes confusing on the website. But if you don't want to spend the $249 US dollar for MicroSeed, you can probably get all the things you need for like, I don't know, $20, $30, maybe $50, depending on what you already have at home, and build your own metal storage. And that's, I think, the most important thing. Like, I don't want to promote MicroSeed. I want to promote self-custody and you putting your seed phrase on something durable. I want you to run a node. I want you to be educated in the space, and you can do this entirely without me and MicroSeed. Just that I think we have built an amazing solution, but you can literally do it yourself. And there are blueprints out there. There are YouTube videos explaining you to do exactly that. And you should definitely look them up and see how those things are actually working.
Awesome, Robin. Well, I do appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for giving me your time. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thank you for tuning in to the Bitcoin broadcast. We will put all the links to Robin and MicroSeed below in the description. And please follow along, subscribe, and we will catch you next time. Peace.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.